I am the Director of Education with the International Screenwriters Association. My name is Max. I also have a consulting company called The Story Farm, which I think most of you probably are already aware, but I'm offering 50% off my consulting services. The consulting services are not just I read your script, give notes. It's more than that. Yes, of course, I read your scripts and give notes, but I'm much more focused on a longer term approach to developing not only your project, but you, even if it's just from a 4-call package, and that's the minimum that I offer. But I want to be developing you as a writer through education, but then on the other side of it, also, of course, creative development. So in a way, it's kind of like hiring a personal trainer for your writing. And thank you, Diane. Max is amazing at development. She said that. I didn't say that. But anyway, 50% off. I've never done that. The way with the world right now and the economy and inflation, I thought, you know what, let's put it out there and maybe folks can save some money. But you can email me at max@thestoryfarm.org. I can't take everybody. So mainly just available time. I know there are probably some of you who have reached out to me already. I just haven't had a chance to reply. I replied to some. I haven't been able to get back to the reply. I'm working on it. We've got a lot of things going on. But anyway, Director of Education with the ISA. I also have a consulting company, but I'm also the co-VP of development with Creative Screenwriter Productions, which is a kind of an offshoot where we have an agent and we're trying to get material out to town, and we've been pitching like crazy to all these different companies, a few different projects, and it's been going well. Huge, incredible experience. But some of what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be kind of in reference to my experience in the industry as just an executive working in the industry, but also, of course, as an educator. And so it's a good reference in terms of how I work with writers and trying to give, direct feedback and from a creative standpoint, but also educational and inspirational information. A couple things. So before I get into 9 things every writer needs to know, I'm going to give you some disclaimers where that's concerned. Don't worry. So a couple things. Most of you know we have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It takes you 7 seconds. It's free. And it's like just a wealth of education over there. I have a show with Shayna Weber. She's my coworker with the ISA, and we have a show called Insider News, where every week we talk about the entertainment news and stuff. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. One little piece of an announcement: you're going to be hearing a lot more about this coming up, but we are launching a new membership through the ISA called the Craft membership. It's not out and available. It probably won't be for another couple months. We're still kind of getting through the development of it, but probably before the end of the year at the very least. It's just something to keep your eyes on. It's going to include the Connect membership, but it's going to also be on top of the Connect membership a whole bunch of education, basically in an almost virtual literal sense. Everything that I've ever recorded and will continue to record will be available through the Craft membership, plus very specific educational quick tips, interviews with a bunch of different executives and consultants, and we have a whole bunch of big plans. It's going to be very inexpensive. So just keep an eye on that. I'm relaunching my Craft podcast. Years ago, I had a solo podcast where I would release an episode. I think it was at least every week. I'm relaunching that. I'm going to get that going probably before the end of August. Eventually that's going to be exclusively and only available through the Craft membership, but for the time being, it'll be free for everybody. And that's it. I just wanted to throw some announcements out there. Yeah, if you have questions about what I was saying about my Story Farm consulting, email me, max@thestoryfarm.org. Offering 50% off. It's only until August 5th, so it's for a short time. All right. I don't think I'm going to be going all that long, although I say that every time and I just end up rambling. But I'm happy to see so many people on, because I think this is an important set of topics to cover. The title of this is 9 Things Every Writer Needs to Know. I hate using the word need, because it's like I'm forcing you to agree with me. And you'll see that this list, most of you are going to be like, well, duh. But all of these we need these reminders more often than we tend to get them. And we need to hear them and understand what I mean by these different 9 things. I also want to say that there are a lot more than just 9 things that writers need. Okay, so I'm not including things like discipline or the basic availability of time, patience, thick skin. There are a ton of things that every writer needs. These are going to get into a little bit more of a practical approach with also somewhat of an esoteric, level of reference, and you'll see what I mean. So with that disclaimer, again, kind of going back to this idea of need. Through my experience of working with writers, arguably since 2006, maybe even a little bit before, but not only on a literal consulting basis, but also developing projects to then take out to town, but then also my interactions with executives and producers and managers and agents, and over that time. These are 9 things that were the first that came to my head when I was planning this webinar, and I think it's important for all of us to be reminded. I am going to be reading from my notes. Hopefully I can keep it a little bit more entertaining than just me standing and reading this. Again, if you have questions, there's a Q&A portion of the your window down below. Please put your more formal questions there. Obviously, if you have comments or any just random quick little question that maybe other people might be able to answer too, you can throw it in the comment box. But I will get to those questions when we're done. But I guess we can just get started. I'll probably go for a half hour-ish, maybe 40, we'll see. And then I want to leave some time for questions. I know you always have a lot. Okay, so this is in no particular order of priority or importance, because I think they are all important. You group all these together, okay? And I will explain each one, some more than others, because some you'll see are pretty obvious. The first one, and again, this was the first things that came to my mind, other than the last one, which I'm purposely saving for the last one. But the first one was an understandable hook. So we have to have, as a writer, within our projects in total, this conceptual get it factor. So in a practical sense, it's a unique approach to an understandable situation. But that sounds kind of like, well, what do you mean? Can you explain that? So an understandable hook, you already know what that means inherently. When you hear of movies like The Purge or Liar Liar or Independence Day, or, and it doesn't have to be a huge, big budget type of movie. The Gray Man that just came out on Netflix. I don't know I guess you could say the hook of that is this, CIA agent, or actually it's more of a secret covert operative who, I don't know. I didn't like the movie. I thought it was really stupid, but nonetheless, it's about one of the biggest botched covert ops, and it's all fictional. And yet they didn't focus enough on the biggest botched covert op. Whatever. If you want to watch the movie, maybe you'll love it. I didn't enjoy it. But we need something within our projects, and every single project has this. Some are just much more subtle and a lower concept than others, but you have to be able to get your project boiled down to just a couple sentences. And I'm talking about long lines. I mean, when you're just referencing, what is this? Not what it's about, because the word about can sometimes reference theme or message, or, the feeling you're trying to present, or, comps to other movies. Don't do that. You have to get to the hook. What is this story from a literal standpoint? What are we seeing as an audience? What are we experiencing in the second act of a movie? What is that situation that is going to occur over and over again? Some projects have just a much bigger and easy to see and understand hook, like a Liar Liar, where it's a lawyer who was unable to tell a lie for 24 hours. But that's directly in reference to a moment. That's a moment we're going to see over and over again. Every movie technically has this. Some, again, or a TV show. White Lotus is much more subtle and low concept, but it's still about this group of people that goes to a resort in Hawaii and all hell breaks loose, based on just kind of how messed up they are and how many difficulties they have in their lives. Granted, that might have been 3 sentences, but at least you're getting to the heart of it. So you need to get to that core understandable hook in your project, this conceptual get it factor. The reason for that is so that people who know nothing about your project can quickly get on the same page as you. Because I don't know how many times we read through the writing gigs, or we get pitches or log lines from people, or some kind of a one-page summary, and like half of it is backstory or an explanation of why the character is the way he or she is. And you got to get us on the same page from a conceptual level. Remember, for those of you who attend my webinars, I talk about this all the time, especially all of you story farmers who work with me one-on-one. I have drilled this into everybody's head. We want to be looking at projects from a top-down approach, concept first. And this isn't just for considering projects or reading scripts. I'm talking at a literal development standpoint. Developing your projects from a concept place first, then you get into character development, and then character and concept work together because you help develop the concept a little bit more by developing your characters a bit more. They bounce off of each other. Then you get into a structural development where it's outlining, you're looking at the beats, you're trying to come up maybe with some scenes, but at least just in terms of brainstorming. What are some, moments that are going to happen? How do those moments then help define kind of the DNA of the project? You're getting into the outlining stage. Then you get into the page work. So it's those 4 levels of development, I call it. Concept needs to be determined and focused on much more and for a longer period of time than we tend to do. You want to be testing that out. You want to get to this understandable hook. Okay, the next one, uniqueness. Duh. But we want to think of uniqueness not just as concept. Uniqueness comes from a combination of an interesting, flawed character meeting a situation expressed through a voice that audiences don't always hear. Okay, so yes, of course it has a reference to concept. You want to be thinking fresh and new and different, but yes, you don't want to be writing something that's derivative or exactly like some other romantic comedy that you've seen. That's what I meant by duh. But uniqueness also is coming from a place of, in reference in a lot of ways, an understandable hook. A great unique hook is really just a continuation here, right? I was talking about understandable hook. Now we want to make sure that this is different. That's pretty straightforward. There's not that much I need to explain about that. This connects to one of the other needs that I'll get to in a second, but I'll repeat what I said before because it kind of sounds like a formula, which in a lot of ways it is a brainstorming formula anyway. Uniqueness comes from a combination of an interesting, flawed character meeting a situation expressed through a voice that audiences don't always hear. Okay, fresh, new, different. Have we seen this before? If you say yes, and you can't lie to yourself, we all know that we can't lie to ourselves, then you have to figure out a way to flip it or turn it around or add a layer on there. It's okay in the beginning stages of your conceptual development to think, I've kind of seen that before. And they kind of did that in this movie or in this TV show. It's fine. It doesn't mean you're just going to scrap the idea. It's up to you then to figure out ways to flip it or make it a little bit bigger. It's kind of like the idea of Christmas Chronicles, written by Matt Lieberman. He took a Christmas movie, but then added found footage to it. That's fresh. That's unique. We haven't seen that before. And then, of course, the rest of the story was a different take on the Christmas Eve adventure that we see with Santa. In the end, it ended up being like, it's kind of predictable. But predictability and uniqueness doesn't always go hand in hand. Okay. The next one, you need other eyes on your script. I know, again, this is kind of like, duh, we're 3 in, and this guy really isn't even talking about anything I've never heard of. Newsflash, all of these things you will all have heard before. I'm going to go into more detail with some of these things, but we need to be reminded of all of these things. You need other eyes on the script. You need to present your material to at least 3 other sets of eyes. And these people who you give the script to, they need to give you the honest and sometimes brutal truth with constructive criticism. Now, again, that sounds like duh. And a lot of you were thinking, well, I can't afford to send it off to all these and pay these consultants and get, find people through writing groups, through online forums. When I was writing my Wishkeeper book, my young adult fantasy adventure, I didn't really know anybody who had ever written a novel before. And so I had to find a community of people who have done this, because I was learning and I was brand new. And so I found a lot of different novel writing communities through different message boards and things. And people were so giving with their time. They would read little snippets and chapters and they'd give me very constructive feedback. And I needed that because it's so easy to get stuck in this idea of, I'm an amazing writer, my project is perfect, I'm going to send it out. But that's coming from a place of vanity in a lot of ways, where you're actually just looking for kind of this validation for someone to tell you it's great. I'm telling you right now, the likelihood of multiple people just outright telling you that your script is great and perfect, extremely low. And it should be. It just should be. Eventually, we are going to get to a point in our career where people are like, boy, we are really loving what you're doing. But everyone is going to have notes, always. I don't care who it is. I don't care. And you personally, if you watch a movie that's already done and on Netflix, you're going to be critical of it. Even if you loved it, you're probably going to find some things where it's like, yeah, there's some moments that are kind of cheesy or whatever. There's never going to be a perfect screenplay. So you just have to open your mind to that. Giving it to 3 other people at least will help you compile notes that are from different sources, and you can start looking at patterns. Just get one set of notes, because that person may have had a bad day, or they're eating lunch while they're reading your script and it took them 4 hours to read something that should have taken them an hour and a half. You got to get 3 sets of notes. On that note, though, I want to mention coverage. The word coverage, that's not notes. So in terms of where I'm assuming most of us are, where we're kind of at the relative beginning stages of our career, or we've been doing this a long time, we haven't quite sold something yet, or we haven't really established our career yet. That there's a pretty broad range there. Coverage comes along from the production company or studio level. It's a literal industry term that a junior agent or a junior executive of some kind will give coverage on a project so that that document can be sent up to their higher ups, and that person, whatever the higher up is, it doesn't have to read the whole script. They see, well, what does my junior executive think? It's not just a pass or consider. They give a little bit of a summary. Coverage ultimately is just a summary with maybe some rankings or whatever. I think the dialogue was an 8 and the structure was a 5 or whatever. Those aren't notes. That isn't helpful. We need people who are giving you constructive reasons as to why something is working and why something is not, and then even some slight suggestions of brainstorms. We need that from multiple sources. Okay, and then moving on to the next one. And I can't stress this enough. I can't stress all of these enough, but multiple drafts. There's just no way around it. You need to be rewriting your material. It's just absolutely critical. The problem is that rewriting is not just trimming scene direction, or removing or adding dialogue, or creating some additional scenes without removing any other scenes. That's not really rewriting. Rewriting is making very difficult decisions to get rid of some scenes that you might very well love because of the reasons from these other sets of notes that you've received. Now, I'm not saying every single rewrite needs to be a 90% rewrite. Sometimes you nail it on the first draft. But even if you feel like you nailed it, there are still things you have to change. If one scene is removed, it changes the whole flow of the whole project. So structure doesn't feel right, or the one scene was setting something off, and now you remove the payoff. That means, oh, wait a minute, I need to figure out how to pay off the sentiment that I was presenting in this scene. You got to step back. Don't work the rewrite in the script. Go back to an outline stage. Go back to just a prose brainstorming process. Really consider, how am I rewriting this? And that how can be looked at from really the main story elements of main character, secondary character, the opponent, theme and message, and then whatever the second, your second act or the middle of your story is going to be. For an hour-long drama, that's like, acts 2 and 3 and 4. It's the middle of the episode. Make those big decisions, because, and sometimes set the script down. And don't work on it, work on something else, because you're going to learn, you're going to come about some new ideas along the way. So you have to go through multiple drafts. You cannot rely on the first or even the second draft. I would argue that you're going to be going through 3 or 4 drafts. On top of all of this, I didn't write this down, but it just popped into my head. Let's say after the third draft, you're feeling really good. You're getting sets of notes back from people, and you're getting very positive feedback. And they're like, you know what? I think this is pretty close. You might be able to tweak some things here and there. Maybe some of the jokes need to be punched up, but I feel like this is ready for industry eyes, so-called. That doesn't mean you're done, because those industry eyes are then going to be considering that project. Let's say they say yes to it, which would be amazing, and they take it on in some form of a shopping agreement or an option, and they go through development with you. They're probably going to have you go through 2 or 3 more drafts as well, because they're coming at it from their own slate intent. Their creative, their company's creative mandate. Like, what type of project are we really trying to get out there? We might have this actor in mind that is going to like this element, but the actor or the character that you have developed isn't quite matching with that actor. There are so many different reasons that you're going to go through a rewrite. So I'm just preparing you. You can't just rely on 1 or 2 drafts. I know I would argue 100% of you already know that. It's just good to be reminded. This is a big one. Understanding of your chosen genre and audience. You got to be a nerd about what you're working on. It's okay to just geek out on the not only your project, but the world that project lives in, especially the genre that project lives in. You know, it takes research, but you need to be a nerd about your genre. Like if you're writing, and this is a pretty simple need, I'm not going to go too far into this because I think you all get it, but if you're writing a romantic comedy, you absolutely need to watch all of the classics, plus the new romantic comedies. Because if you're in a meeting with an executive, and let's say it's a high level veteran executive who's made a ton of romantic comedies in the past, and he or she starts asking you, have you seen this movie? Have you seen this romantic comedy? This one, you know, with Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, which I can remember the actors, I can't remember the name of the movie. But, you know, if they ask you these questions, you need to at least know that that movie exists, know what it's about, and can speak to it in some way, because that person is looking for an expert. And so you have to be prepared. And so you have to have this understanding of your chosen genre and audience. When I was writing my fantasy book, I'm going back to my own, you know, self here. I had to read a whole bunch of other fantasy books. I mean, I was already raised on fantasy, so I had read a ton of them anyway. But there were a lot that I hadn't read, a lot, primarily Robert Jordan. I didn't even know who he was. And so I had to go in and be like, all right, I have to know who this is, because, you know, it's a different world, the book world. I'm not necessarily taking, you know, pitch meetings, but, you know, it's for my own knowledge. Okay, moving to the next one. This is pretty simple, but you need to read. Absolutely need to read. There are no ands or buts or ifs or maybes or I don't know. This isn't this is a practical approach to a need, but writers need, you know, I want to say it differently than when I'm reading here and not just, you know, be boring. But yes, you have to read scripts at the very least, and there are a lot of ways to find them. Script Lab, who is arguably one of the ISA's competitors, but they do a lot of great things, and their script database is excellent, and I'm pretty sure they're all free. Just get those scripts, read them. And they don't have to be for movies that you know or love. It's actually better to read a script that you haven't seen the movie or TV show for. But you also have to be an avid novel reader. We have to be immersing ourselves in words. And yes, because we're in this medium of screenwriting, we have to be a student of just the written word. How have people been doing this prior to me? It's kind of referencing the idea of being a nerd about what you do. And it's all, yeah, going back to my notes, it's not just in terms of this need to read. It's not just so you can see how others format a script or even a book. You know, it's not about formatting. You'll figure that out. Final Draft does it for you anyway. It's about understanding subtext and meaning and themes presented through visuals. Stephen King is one of the best at that. You know, he goes on and explains certain things, but every now and then he'll just say, you know, gosh, there's a really famous quote that I should have looked up before this, but it was in reference to so much can be said about just a tipped over tricycle in a dirty old alleyway. Like that visual in and of itself tells a story. And so the better we become as artists in terms of the craft and just the written word, the easier we'll have an understanding of how to dictate to the audience what we mean by the visual. Ultimately, that's what reading does. It immerses ourselves in the meaning behind words, because that's all we really have to use. Obviously, it's our paintbrush. And so we have to use the words in a way that inflicts, if that's the right word, emotion inside of people. And yes, of course, it has to do with how are they writing scene direction? What are they doing with parentheticals? And, you know, fades in and fade out. Should I use production references? All those things, that's easily learned, you know, but the harder part about what we do is figuring out how to deliver emotion to the audience. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. But it's really easy in this whole educational process to get caught up in the idea of, well, you know, they did that in that way, meaning they wrote the dialogue this way, or they, you know, they italicized this group of words. And, you know, it's fine. We should know that. I'm not saying forget that stuff, but really, what are we doing here? You know, nobody is going to necessarily, and I've actually been proven wrong with this statement, but nobody's going to take a screenplay and frame it. People have, and I was joking with even one of my friends here in town has a framed Simpson script on the wall, but I think you know what I mean. People aren't necessarily looking at the script just as in and of itself a pure level of artwork. It's to help other people create the artwork. So you got to read. Okay. All right. The next one, you're going to be annoyed by this. I'm sure in some way, but education. You need education. And I'm sure a lot of you are just kind of like, oh my God, what is there something else on TV right now I can watch? Because what is this guy talking about? It goes along with your need to read. And of course, I'm going to be selling people on education because my title is Director of Education, but it's a much more practical meaning that I'm trying to hit here. You need to understand how and why structure works. You can memorize formula and the beats through repetition, just through multiple writing projects. You learn the techniques, though, the techniques that are going to help you brainstorm and develop. And eventually you're going to have these well-developed characters that you know how to place using tools and exercises. I mean, that's ultimately what education is helping you do. Education is a pretty broad word, but I'm talking about the literal education of understanding how exercises can help you through the outlining process, to help you understand how to write a good log line. What does someone expect from a pitch deck? That there are practical things that I'm mentioning here. And inevitably, it's going to help you then just be faster. You're going to be able to know how to work through that development and brainstorming process faster because you're not trying to figure out how to do the outline. You just know how to do it. But also, on the more esoteric level, because of how much you're reading, because of the scripts that you're studying, scene studies while you're watching movies, that's going to help you then make the more creative decisions faster. But ultimately, what we're doing here is a craft, right? Like this, just like any other trade. The more often you do it, the better at it you're going to become, but you can't just rely on the doing as the only part of the education. You got to sit back and study and practice in other ways too. I'm just looking at my notes here. So yes, education's based on also in watching and studying other movies and TV shows. So it's just a full breadth. You have to be a student of this. Moving on to the other one, next one. So this is a tough one because there's a big, huge caveat here, but I'm saying that you need to write at least a total of 5 separate screenplays. I know for some of you are like, oh God, I'm barely on one. Some of you here are like, great, nailed that. I've been doing this for a long time. I've got 15 or 20, whatever. It's great. I think the point here is that, and you probably already know my point, is that you can't just stop at 5. Like, oh, I made it to 5. Great. Now I'm a writer. I remember, and I've told this story in past webinars. I was at a bar. It was some kind of event that I was going to, and there was a pretty high level producer that was within the group that I was hanging with. Good guy, really cocky, but he was a good person. He was just very confident. Nonetheless, there was a young woman who had almost literally just gotten into town. Like we were kind of joking how new she was. Like she had just come in like 2 days before, on this long road trip. So she was very new, fresh out of college, and he was having a conversation with her. And I was overhearing like, oh boy, what is this guy going to tell her? Because it was all about advice, like she wanted advice from him. And so I'm like, oh man, what is this guy? Because I kind of knew that he was a very brash, upfront person. I'm like, God, don't kill this person's dream. And he said, you're not a screenwriter until you've written 20 screenplays. And my immediate reaction was, oh man, wrong word choice, because I understand what he's saying, because through the process of writing multiple projects, you come to learn so much, not just how to write and tell a story that is going to end up on screen. So all the educational aspects and elements of formatting and all those things, but you also come to understand subtext and meaning behind the visuals, like I've mentioned, but more importantly, who you are as a writer. And beyond that, from an industry standpoint and a business standpoint, people will know you've written these other projects. You have a whole bunch under your belt. You're not brand new, because people want people with experience. It's like any other job. If you're applying for a job, they want to know what your resume is. So when the way he said that was incorrect, because I could see the blood draining from her face, because it takes a long time to write 20 screenplays. So, but I've always remembered that because I understood what he meant. He probably just could have said it in a different way. So I'm saying at least 5 separate scripts. Preferably you're writing a lot more. And again, it's all just because you need to have that experience. I've mentioned this to some of my writers. The process of writing multiple projects also teaches you, and this is not industry or business related at all, because of course, the more scripts you have, the better chance you have of selling one or getting one set up or whatever. But the more projects and scripts that you write, the faster you come to a realization of how you can't judge your own craft and ability on one project. Because every script is different. Some scripts are going to be really easy to write. They flow. The hook is a little bit bigger and more obvious. It's a little bit more high concept because of the type of character and because of the situation. I can see the moments and scenes faster. And so it's just, you can zoom through it. And suddenly after you're done with your script, like, boy, okay, this is going to need work, but that felt good. I think I'm really good at this. Great. I hope all of you have that feeling. But there are going to be some scripts, regardless of your experience in terms of how far along you are in your career, that just kill you. You can't figure them out. You don't know how to choose the right character for the right situation or whatever it might be. It's just going to be a bear. You can't allow yourself to judge your writing ability because of how difficult that script is. And you understand that through writing many, many more scripts than just 1 or 2. Finally, and I do see, oh, good, got some questions down there, so I'll have plenty of time. Finally, the last one. So I don't want to call this number 9 because I think this one you could argue is number 1. So again, I'm not ranking any of these. But every writer needs to understand, or at least attempt to come to understand, what their voice is. And I think this is incredibly important. And I'm probably just going to read straight through here. But this, voice thing, it's the why behind what you do as a creative, but also this deeper spiritual kind of self-help personal growth approach to finding who you are as a person. So there's something much bigger going on here than just trying to sell a script, make some money. The likelihood of that happening is pretty low anyway, but I'm trying to stay positive. You personally connect to movies and TV and stories, so much that you decided to write your own movies and TVs and stories. So we have to ask why did I choose to do that? And sure, some of the reasons can be it's fun, to get caught up in the magic of movie making, or these amazing special effects and the action and the suspense, and maybe the cool factor of making big bucks and attending premieres and celebrity parties and blah blah blah, man. That shit's all just bullshit. It's actually what we do, incredibly hard work, and it's sometimes really scary, and it's sometimes depressing and lonely, and the letdown and the disappointment is constant, and we too easily define our well-being and our self-worth on those material things. So that's my part of my little personal inspirational TED talk there. But we have to stop thinking that way. And I know you all inherently know that, but the greatest storytellers understand that the true impact on people's lives is made through a visual, a piece of artwork that symbolizes what they, the writer, the creator, the artist, deal with personally on their own. Their own problems and doubts and fears and hopes and wishes, dreams, those are all universal. So asking yourself, what does my special uniqueness have to offer the world? And how do I present it through story? It's the beginning of then understanding the real reason behind why we're doing what we're doing. So in a very broad sense, your voice is you. You chose to dive into this crazy process of crafting a story through a screenplay, but it's because you have a piece of you, multiple pieces of you probably, to share with the world. Figuring out how to share those parts, that's the hard part. That comes through practice and repetition and education, experience, and then, in general, just time. But mainly because, your voice is always evolving. It's changing because you're changing. You evolve over time. And, voice, ultimately what voice is just your perspective, and your perspective on the world around you is going to change. Then of course your stories are going to change just as you grow. So, don't choose a story just to tell it because you think it's a cool concept. Choose that cool concept that you feel really like, hey, this is exciting, because it provides a vehicle for you to share who you are, and you are the only one who can tell that story. Once you really hone in on that, everything is going to change in terms of not only how you approach your stories, but how you approach your acts, how you approach your scenes, how you approach your character development, how you approach the third act, the final moment, the final scene, or what, all of those things change because you're now connecting yourself to a particular project. Even if you're feeling like, how the heck am I connected to this wild idea I just had? I wrote a story about a 16-year-old shredded wing, 5-inch tall fairy, and it's a female. I mean, I have quite literally no connection to that. So I knew it was a cool idea, and I was having fun writing the idea. But the only way it was going to become emotional was looking at my own personal, not only perspective on the world, which is arguably what voice is, but my own personal experiences of emotion when I was younger. So I can then connect, at least on a universal level, to that character. Then the choices that character made and eventually makes throughout your story, they come to you a little bit faster because you understand what they mean. Voice is a huge topic. I've talked about it before in past webinars. I think the easiest way of thinking about voice is looking at how, as just an example, two people who have the same exact experience. And I remember interviewing a couple of writers from Bob's Burgers. One of the writers was a twin, and he said, it's interesting where voice is concerned because I had a twin growing up, still obviously have a twin, but they experienced the same situation growing up. They had the same, quite literally, the same experiences because they were always together. Their parents fought a lot, not in terms of like horribly abusively, thankfully, but they fought a lot and they argued a lot. And one of the kids, the one who became the writer on Bob's Burgers, just had a natural reaction of it's kind of ridiculous and silly, and he had to come at it from a comedic standpoint, probably as a self-defense mechanism. The other twin looked at that in a very dramatic and depressed way, and he had a lot of difficulties with it. They were experiencing the same exact thing. That, I think, is a good example of voice, because you could have a story that someone else may very well also be writing, but your take on it, your personal and emotional impact is going to then, and I should say impact, but your personal and emotional experiences is going to then shape your version of that story. And if you can remember that, I think everything's going to flow in a much, I don't want to say easier way, because none of this is easy, much more natural way. And you're going to have a stronger understanding of how to approach story and which story to write, because you might end up coming up with some idea that's like this sci-fi space opera or whatever. And you can decide, no, I don't think that story's for me. It's an interesting concept and idea, but I just don't think I'm the right person to write that. That's a really healthy answer, because eventually when your career does grow, you could be offered writing assignments. You might take a meeting with someone and they present you with an idea. Hey, we need a writer for this particular idea. Could you pitch us this project? You might end up saying, you know what, I just don't think I'm the right writer for that project, but I would love to hear another, pitch or whatever. It depends on where you are in your career. You may need to take the job. Anyway, I think you understand where I'm going with voice. All 9 of these things, I'm going to repeat them so you just remember. Understandable, hook, conceptual get it factor. Uniqueness, pretty straightforward. Other eyes on your script. Multiple drafts, so rewrites. An understanding of your chosen genre and audience. You need to be a nerd about what you're working on. You need to read. You got to be reading. I don't read enough. Well, for pleasure and leisure, for fun study. I read a ton in terms of scripts and other people's material. And I of course learn from that all the time, but you need to be reading. Education being number 6, pretty straightforward. Is that 6? I think that was 7. Anyway, number 8, you need to write at least a total of 5 separate scripts, preferably more, but that's kind of the mark. You got to work through them. And then finally, voice. You got to understand what your voice is. What is my voice? You have to be able to define that. What's my perspective on the world? You want to choose, or at least know how to choose your approach to a particular genre. And I've used this example before. If Judd Apatow was handed Nightmare on Elm Street, he's not going to make a straight thrash, or I guess thrasher horror would be the term. He's going to make it into a comedy. Because he doesn't connect necessarily. I mean, I'm speaking for him, but he probably doesn't connect with, thrasher horror like that. He's going to put his own spin on it. So you want to be thinking along those lines. Those are the 9 needs. Let me see what we have for comments. I was purposely not looking at these. I'll get to questions as well, everybody. So just give me a second here. Let's see here. Interesting flawed character meeting a situation expressed through a voice that audiences don't always hear. Yeah. There you go, Brian. Philadelphia Story. Yes, that's what I was trying to think of with Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn. A classic. Let's see here. So great idea to be recommending projects. I think that everybody should be sharing, movie or TV shows. Scott is saying success doesn't come when you believe you know what you're doing. It comes when you understand that there's always more to learn. Totally. Thank you to Finding Voice. You're welcome. Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's get into some questions. There are a lot here. And I always do my best to try to get to all of them here. Let's see. So do you know, this is from Jeffrey. And mind you, everybody, in these webinars, which I do on a regular, every month basis, the questions don't have to be specific to just the topic. I'm happy to answer other questions. I may not go too much longer than our usual hour, just because I have somewhere to be after this. And, but anyway, Jeffrey, do you know any screenwriting Zoom groups that might be able to give me great writing support? If not, then can you help me with my scripts? Sure. Jeffrey, just email me, max@thestoryfarm.org. And I can give you, I host a writing group and it's $50 a month. We meet at least twice a month. It's a little bit of, primarily with just support and education, but there are some workshopy elements to it. But yeah, you can email me, max@thestoryfarm.org, O-R-G. Lindelius, I read somewhere about something called the ISA Development Slate. Could you give some information about what it is, how writers go about being accepted? So that's a big question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get into all details, but the ISA Development Slate is, let's see if I can summarize it quickly. You submit. So we have a notes service through the ISA. I think it's $99 for general notes. So you do have to submit your project for notes. That project, you receive excellent notes. I think, of course, I'm going to highly tout the ISA note service, but our readers are really good. And the guys that are running I shouldn't say guys, the people that are running the actual reading program, they really know what they're doing. Yeah, Catherine, thank you. They are good notes. So at the very least, you're going to get notes in your project for a relatively inexpensive fee compared to other note services. If that reader really likes the project because they score it internally, and if it hits a relatively, it's not a perfect number, but if the project, is fitting either a mandate or the reader thinks it's pretty solid, they'll pass it up to the higher ups, just like a production company or a studio would. And then it's considered for inclusion in the development slate. Usually writers who are included in the development slate are the writers that are winning contests or are referred to us. It's relatively rare to be accepted on the development slate just through the notes process. I bet the executives I'm working with, my teammates, the ISA, are like, dear God, Max, don't tell them that. No, that it's not a secret. The development slate is reserved for writers who are working their butts off, who have received some success in the past. I mean, the slate is already really full. I think we have well over 100 writers on the slate as it is. And once you're on the slate, then our team of executives are helping submit that project to interested production companies and studios, et cetera. We wish we could take everybody on. We really do. It's one thing I've noticed, everybody, that, you notice that I didn't put any industry related needs here in this list. sure, you could say every writer needs access, but not every writer, ooh, this is going to sound really mean and critical, and I apologize up front, not every writer deserves access. I hate saying it so bluntly, but some writers are not ready, and that's okay, because eventually you can become ready. That's why you're on webinars like this, so you're improving the education. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here because I told you this is a big topic. At the very least, the note services with the ISA is great. I'm not trying to just sell you all to spend $100 and get notes. The development slate is reserved for those writers that have been working hard. They've found some success in other means. They're referred to us in various ways. There are contest winners, a lot of contests that either the ISA hosts or other organizations are referred to us. Those people in a lot of ways are automatically accepted into the development slate. So we're looking for scripts that are done and ready and that we can confidently submit to production companies. I could keep going, but let's just hit the next one here. So, do you need to be good with the English language to complete a script? If you answer yes, then what must I do to become good with the English language? Speaking of, what must I do to become good with the English language, i.e. grammar, without going to college? Because I literally can't. Okay, so reading is the least expensive way to learn the written word. The classics can be tricky because some of the way the older, the classic authors write could arguably be a little outdated, but it is a great way to learn and understand just the flow of words. This may sound like a lazy answer, but you could very easily Google, I need to learn proper grammar. And I guarantee you there is a ton of resources out there that will help you understand that. From a screenplay standpoint, perfect grammar is not absolutely necessary. Now, I don't want you to take that and go, cool, I'm not going to learn grammar. I do want you to read and pay attention to the flow of words and do that Google search and teach yourself. Here's what these various terms mean, and when do I use a comma, and when do I use this, and that's important. We should know that. But it's not essential in a screenplay. You can write fragmented sentences. You don't have to end, a sentence perfectly. You can end, oh gosh, I'm not even remembering all the terms. So I guess arguably my answer would be no, you don't need to be good with the English language, but you do need to have a way with words. Grammarly helps a lot. Susie, I will try to copy and paste the list when I get through these questions. Christy, which do you find to be most helpful features of Final Draft? Oh boy, I am terrible at this answer, Christy, because I don't use any of the features. Honestly, I just use the formatting. Tab is the most useful and helpful feature. Honestly, I don't even. Some of the features are amazing, but I don't know them well enough to be able to comment. If anybody here is like really proficient with Final Draft, let Christy know in the comments here and let here, this feature is really great. I know that they have some kind of online versions of sharing if you have certain people you want to share the script with, or I don't know enough to tell you. Let's see, another one. Do you know any screenwriting Zoom groups? Oh, he just rephrased and fixed that. Wow, nice editing skills. I didn't even know you could do that. The Bonsai Supply, writing 5+ scripts, same genre. How do you feel about writing in different genres? No, it could be in any genre. You do want to try to find that something that there's a through line in terms of maybe theme or the type of character, or what you're trying to say from, a message standpoint from those 5 scripts. It doesn't always help a writer if you have 5 extremely different screenplays. At the same time, it's fine to have 5 extremely different screenplays, because at the beginning of your career, you don't really know what's going to land, at least in terms of which project is going to land or sell where or get set up somewhere. From a long-term career standpoint, it is probably good for you to kind of land somewhere that's a little, you're not jumping too far from genre to genre, but that's why it helps you figure out what genre do I like best. That's what I've realized, that I gravitate much more toward comedy in terms of my writing, because I'm just kind of a cynical person and my perspective is that way. So I would rather make comedic jokes about things. Christy, do you recommend writing scripts sequentially or in parallel or just personal style? I think you mean like 1-2 scripts at the same time or something. That's totally a personal choice. I personally don't like jumping around to too many because it just becomes overwhelming. So it's personal choice, Christy. Some people, like a Matt Lieberman, by the way, who's, Christmas Chronicles and Free Guy, and God, you should see his upcoming scripts on his IMDb profile. They're just all huge, big, really fun movies. He's constantly brainstorming and working on ideas and developing. Does that mean he's writing 5 scripts at the same time? Probably not. He's probably working on 1 or 2, maybe 3 if he's got a really important assignment or something, but he's also a full-time A-list screenwriter, so there are a lot of relative things that come into play. How much time do you have? I argue when I'm working one-on-one with my writers that we're working on one project at a time. It helps me just in terms of my, ability to give you feedback. Let's see, Joe. Oliver Stone came to UCLA screenwriting class and was asked how many scripts he wrote before selling his first, and the answer was 20. It's Oliver frickin' Stone. Yeah. Let's see here. Favorite genre to work with and why? I kind of mentioned that just now. I love working in comedy. I love fantasy, but it's so hard to sell fantasy. The market is it's just so expensive. And when you've got Wheel of Time and now Lord of the Rings coming out soon, how much more can you do, really? So yeah, I would argue that I lean more toward comedy. It doesn't mean I don't like the other genres. I love a great scary movie, So you got the script, this is from Catherine. You have some pitch meetings. Now the pitch deck's requested. What's your best advice for people when it comes to making a pitch deck? Should one do it for every TV show script to have it on hand? I'll quickly answer with yes. In terms of for every TV project you're writing, you're going to need a pitch deck. As they write it or after. So this is a whole webinar in and of itself. Shayna Weber has a pitch deck review service on the ISA site. I think if you look under, gosh, I'm going to have to hit the road relatively soon here, guys. But I think there's a feedback, tools. Yeah, under improve your craft. When you should be working on it. Again, it's a personal choice. I find sometimes when you're developing your pitch deck, you actually come up with new ideas, and this is after the script's done and you're thinking, oh shit, I should have done that. So sometimes working on the deck in tandem, or even before as just a brainstorming document, and then it's just kind of a living document as you're working on the script itself. Should one do it for every TV show? Yeah, you should. Is it usually 10 slides or less? No, you can go a little bit longer with a TV series pitch deck. For a feature, you're going to keep it relatively shorter, mainly because there's just less content to put in there for a feature. With the TV series, you're going to have, oh gosh, here we go. I can't spend too much time going into this, but you're going to have a summary of the series. You're going to have a 1-page summary of the pilot, character descriptions for probably no more than 5 characters. Once you go beyond 5, people are like, who are these people? You're going to have season descriptions, trying to hit the overview of the through line of the story for each season. You're going to have episode descriptions for the first season, probably talk about the world, why now should this project get made, maybe a little character writer bio. So you could probably go into the upper teen range for your pitch deck, maybe longer if you have a lot more visuals and a really small amount of words on each page. It's pretty open-ended. It's kind of like take your best guess. In terms of the content, though, you're going to want people giving you notes on it. Any tools, resources that every writer needs in order to complete their script? Screenwriting software. You need screenwriting, like real, not Word. Don't use Word. Don't go use the formatting that where it doesn't match. You're going to be using Final Draft is the real go-to. Movie Magic Screenwriter is solid, pretty expensive. But Writer Duet looks just like Final Draft. It's very inexpensive. There are a whole bunch of other ones. So I would say at the very least, screenwriting software. Some form of, if you're brand new and you've never written a screenplay, some form of coursework is very helpful. You could read Robert McKee's story. You could get some books on screenwriting. Dave Trottier's book, The Screenwriting Bible, is very specific to, very specific formatting questions. So that's helpful. Writer's Duet's it's $8. $8 a month. And you can upgrade to like, whoa, $19 a month or something, to have some extra things. Brenda, through the Story Farm, do you help writers define their voice? Absolutely. I kind of work from, again, a personal trainer standpoint. In a lot of ways, I try to act like your manager without submitting you. I can't submit my writers unless there's a script that is just undeniably fantastic and I've worked with that writer for a while. Then I'll see what I can do. It's just, I can't promise anything with the submission process, but for sure, I can help you just figure out what's going on. I have this exercise called voice pressure points. And it's really the only form of journaling I have my writers do. It's a look back into their past at moments in their lives that you remember that your perspective changed. You were looking at life in one way, something happened or a series of events happened, and you were different after that. There's something in there about who you are, and who you are is a direct correlation with your voice. But so for sure, I can help with that. Yeah. I need some notes from someone who reads rom-coms. Do you know someone who specializes in rom-coms? Someone I would pay. So no, but I know a lot of consultants, and I don't know. I know what you're saying, because yes, it helps to have someone who really knows the genre. But at the same time, all people who are really good at reading, they know all the genres. They understand why a particular genre works in a particular way. And it isn't just about the genre sometimes that needs the notes. It's the characters. It's what the character's doing. It's how much do I know about the character? What's happening structurally? Am I waiting too long for a setup event to occur? Or, is the twist surprising or not? And sometimes that doesn't have to do anything with genre. So I wouldn't worry too much. This is an anonymous question. Wouldn't worry too much about finding someone who specializes in a particular genre. So I would consider the ISA note service. If you're not going to use me, but Danny Manis is a consultant. He's extremely upfront, sometimes too brutally honest, but that's him. He's really good at what he does. Jen Grisanti is extremely expensive, but she's one of the best, especially where TV is concerned. Script Anatomy is a class that is run by, it's a whole organization run by one of my good friends, Tanya Bhattacharya. She has a whole bunch of working TV writers who teach classes on TV. It's not directly a note service, so maybe I'm rambling a little here, but there are a lot of people out there. Michael Haig is one of the best. He's very expensive. Look for, you Google note services, but the ISA's note service is really good. Nora Ephron is probably the best romantic comedy writer ever, for sure. So yeah, you can read those old scripts. So let's see, we've got 3 more I'm going to hit. Okay. Would a person need an agent, distributor, or manager for a completed movie for streaming? Price on beer is too high. So this is a huge question, Bob. It's a good one. Would a person need an agent, distributor, or manager for a completed movie? So I would have to say yes. Arguably the streamer is the distributor, but they're also more often than not the studio that brings on or works with the production company who actually makes it, and then they are the distributor. Yes, you're going to need an agent if you get to that level of selling something that is going to be not only produced but streamed on one of the major streamers, because the agent needs to negotiate your deal. You're going to be better off for it. You're probably going to need an entertainment attorney to make sure that another pair of eyes is looking at your deal. That's a situation that at the moment we really don't have to worry about it. If you're in that situation, Bob, good for you, because that's a success story. So let's see. Can you tell me if the ISA has information on fair use? I don't think we have legal stuff on there, Jamie. I don't think we do, and where that might be found. Again, oh boy, I don't know how to answer that question. It might be a Google search. I feel bad not being able to answer that question, other than I'm pretty sure the ISA doesn't have a lot of information there from a legal standpoint. Let's see. What do you recommend for daily writing, by pages or time? Ooh, really good question, Ricky. I'd love to really dive into that one, but I don't give a finite number to it. because you'll get to a point where I didn't write my 5 pages today. It's okay. Aaron's saying he thinks it's time, and yes, it's time, but it's also about what you do with the time, knowing how to utilize that time. So you're not just sitting there, staring at the wall and go, well, that was a half hour. Sometimes you need to do that. You need to zone out and just think. And that could be, arguably part of your writing time. But how to utilize the time, meaning what tools and exercises, where am I in the development process? And what form am I going to put my ideas in? But because you want to be doing a lot of work well before you get to those pages. You don't want to be just coming up with new ideas when you're writing the pages. Yes, new ideas come to you when you're writing pages, but you want to hopefully have most of those ideas figured out. Otherwise, you're just going to be writing yourself into a corner. You get 35 pages into a draft of a script and you're like, I can't figure this out, etc. In terms of the list to remember the needs, I know this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, almost like I'm negating everything I just said. But for one thing, you're going to have the recording. You'll be able to go back through and remember, and refer to what I'm talking about here. But don't worry about this too much. I'm making an emphasis on, of course, you need these things. But I think you all already know that you do. You're all smart, intelligent people, and you know how to tell a story. It's just about trying to be organized with your approach. And not, it's like having this balance of taking it seriously and not too seriously, managing expectations while also being this hopeful dreamer. That's difficult. But there are so many more things than just the 9 that we need. It's just those 9 that I referenced are really reminders of, in a way, segregating these needs and going, yeah, oh gosh, I haven't read anything in a month. I should probably find a script. I should read a script. And sometimes without any kind of intent of, sometimes we want to read a script because it's like, all right, I'm writing a romantic comedy. I want to try to find a movie that's somewhat similar, and that's fine. But we should just be reading. Like, my parents are retired, so they have a little bit more time, but they read constantly. My dad goes through a book a week. And the stories are wonderful and amazing. And so it's a leisurely read, but also an understanding that I want to be studying these things. So it's just taking an active approach here, everybody, with your process, with your career. And I think I'd probably just be repeating myself and rambling on, but hopefully this was successful. Some folks in the chat box are saying that it was worthwhile, so that makes me feel good. This was a little bit more of an inspirational thing as opposed to a practical approach, and I need to do that sometimes. Otherwise, you just get so stuck in process. All right, everybody, this will be available in about a week. Thank you for joining me and everybody else. Keep working hard, and keep reminding you why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, this is going to become a bear. So I'll see everybody next month. Have a great summer.